Welcome to Mysterious Universe, Season 34, Episode 15. Coming up on the show, we've got the alignment of the fire lays, spontaneous animal combustion, and the hum of the abductees. I'm your host, Benjamin Grundy. Joining me is Aaron Wright.
I see that you've got a follow-up book to something we covered a little while back now.
2013.
Is it that far back?
Yeah.
I remember the cover of this book because it does have that really creepy, it's not even Uncanny Valley, it's just like...
It's just creepy.
It's just creepy.
Children of the Greys by Brett Oldham, and he's gone on to be a well-known, on-the-record alien abductee, self-claimed alien abductee. And this book is very popular. On the cover is this strange blonde hybrid child who he claimed to have met in one of these so-called abductions. And it's an interesting story because there's another abductee who was taken with him who has since gone on the record and admitted, yes, this happened. I have the memories from this experience. So he was with his partner at the time, Denise, he called her in his book. And they were, I mean, Brett had the whole history of,
a long history of it.
Early abductee history, being taken as a child and, strange experiences his entire life. And he was going through this period. He was with this woman, Denise, and he was getting these nosebleeds that started ramping up. And then there was an abduction, and he claims Denise was also conscious during this abduction. They both found themselves in some strange space. And he claims that one of these entities, one of these greys, basically grabbed his head and telepathically told him, you need to watch this, and turned his head for him to watch his then girlfriend, Denise, having some kind of horrific gynecological procedure done on her. He claims that she was screaming, this ungodly scream in this experience. She was clearly terrified and in pain. And then they blacked out.
Is she the witness that's come forward, or is it someone else completely?
She came forward years later.
Right.
She was pregnant at the time. Important detail to the story.
Or given the cover of the book.
And after this experience, she lost the baby. She went in to see her doctor and he couldn't figure it out. He had just done a sonogram like a week earlier and there was no evidence she had been pregnant. I remember when we covered Children of the Greys, the specific comment from the doctor was like, it's like your womb's already been cleaned. There's no tissue. Like there's no remaining tissue at all.
Which is not what's supposed to happen.
Exactly. And so their relationship broke down and they lost contact. But then I think it was about 25 years later, he ended up being contacted about doing I think it was a UFO, some kind of documentary, one of those documentaries. He was interviewed for it. And what he didn't know was that the documentary producers also tracked down Denise, and she went on the record as well and has since gone on the record with her story and gone public about what she claims happened to her as well. And so part of the experiences that followed was him meeting this hybrid being
I remember
years later.
Yeah, but I remember it being immensely unsettling.
Yeah, and he was never sure whether it was Denise's or whether it was his, what the connection was.
Well,
and now we see the follow-up.
Yeah, the cover of the new book, if we have it there. So is this implied, because I don't know anything about the story, but is this implied that that's the child now grown up?
Well, obviously, yeah. That's because on the cover it's got another much better looking hybrid. Like she would pass.
The blue eyes.
The only thing that's different about her is she's got huge eyes.
Yeah.
Other than that, you'd be like, okay, that's a pretty Nordic woman.
Well, there's been a few researchers only recently saying that the program, the hybrid program, has attained such a state that they are walking amongst us and you wouldn't be able to tell.
Yeah, I mean, that's what they say. So we'll go into that. We'll look at the new book, Children of the Greys Aftermath from Brett Oldham. And what makes it interesting is he just doesn't focus on his story, because what happened after he released that book back in 2013, there was a big outreach of people contacting him. And some of them had experiences that he hadn't included in the book that they shared with him that overlapped with his. He ends up finding about 4 or 5 abductees, claimed abductees, who mention these strange details that overlap with his.
Things that were previously published or not published?
Some of them were published, some of them weren't.
Okay. So the ones that aren't published, might stand out a little bit more, because that suggests that, that's a validation as opposed to them just reading the book and claiming that they're abductees.
One of the weird thing that happens is the male abductees, because they claim that when they get taken, they have sperm extracted, and it's like pleasurable, but it's also horrific, and they feel mentally controlled while it's happening. And so this is what Brett did to try and stop this from going on, because he thought all the activity of him being taken was driven by their need to get his
genetic samples.
Yeah, his genetic samples. And so he got a vasectomy. And he thought, that's it.
That's not going to stop it though, is it?
They won't have any use for me. They kept on taking him.
Yeah.
Now he ends up meeting another lifelong abductee who did this exactly the same thing. And it turns out a lot of male abductees resort to this, thinking that this is going to solve the problem. They end up getting vasectomies. But what happened with the other guy, which I'll mention in the Plus extension coming up, instead of using the thing that goes on top of their
like the
genitalia,
pyramid fleshlight, which has been described.
Exactly,
recently.
yeah, the pyramid fleshlight. They just use a giant hypodermic needle.
Oh.
So this
they
poor
use
guy,
that on women, apparently. Like you hear those sorts of stories, and they have to. They just, they use some large rod thing.
Yeah, this poor guy
Awful.
was like, I was getting the alien fleshlight before and it felt pretty good. Now I'm just getting this giant hypodermic needle and it's killing.
Because, they don't care. It's like they're treating us like lab rats.
Massive regret.
Well, it gets worse. You have yelled out a couple of stories that have come out. I don't know the full details, but
it gets way worse than that.
It gets a lot worse. So let's jump into that a little bit later on in the show. But for this show, actually, I wanted to dive into the realm of spontaneous human combustion. But we know a lot about spontaneous human combustion. It's been kind of a staple on the show over the years, and we've looked into it. But I thought, let's just jump back into it and just see if there's any new angles, any new details on it. And it turns out that indeed there is. There seems to be. And we've discussed many possibilities about what spontaneous human combustion could be. So before we even go into what could be the mechanisms behind it, let's talk about the actual cases. Like spontaneous human combustion, if you're new to it, you don't know what it is, I want to give you some insight into what these sorts of cases are. And essentially,
it's when you get angry that your McDonald's order gets stuffed up and you just trash the place. You just combust.
No, that's called flipping out. That's completely different. No, there would be, if you got upset about your McDonald's order because there was one less chicken nuggeted and then you spontaneously burst into flames.
You start yelling and
not
throwing your weight, or just trashing the entire store.
Well, not only do you completely burst into flames, you are incinerated except for your legs. Right, those sorts of cases. I kid you not. So one of the elements that comes up in spontaneous human combustion is that the old trope is, and it's been around since the time of Dickens, like it was published in Charles Dickens' works. It was implied that it was, because around in the Victorian age, it was like there was this belief that spontaneous human combustion was a real danger for people that were alcoholics. It was believed that if you consumed alcohol in excessive amounts, it can accumulate in the tissues of your body, and for whatever reason, it will spontaneously combust. And so there were all these reports. That's why you've got these old Dickens-style kind of reports of, proper dapper gentlemen just suddenly catching on fire in the street and completely incinerating themselves.
The alcohol's the fuel.
Yeah, but the issue is with that is that alcohol is not enough. It doesn't provide enough of a heat source to be able to incinerate a body in the way that spontaneous human combustion does. But that does seem to be the theme with this, is that there are reports of fires that are discovered in people's homes. The fire brigade or police go to investigate, and when they do so, they think they're attending a normal scene of where there has been a fire of some kind, and they find that it's very bizarre. It's an outlier. It sits because it's like things are melted, and I'll get into it. Things are melted that shouldn't be melted, or like the TV melts and yet the newspaper next to them doesn't. And they find that, the body is completely incinerated, carbonized, turned to ash. But there's this weird, almost often, a perfect cut where the legs cut off. It's like, why is it that the entire central core of the body and the head will be consumed and turned into ash? But then why is a leg or an extremity left out? And sometimes it's one leg. It's like the case of Mary Reeser, a very, very well-known case. If you look up spontaneous human combustion, that's the first case that you're probably going to see. And it's a rather graphic image. And I will say, I'm going to play some videos in a moment that does include crime scene photos of alleged spontaneous human combustion victims. So do be aware. Well, all you do see is the limbs, and which is still quite confronting. But because it has been carbonized, the gore factor is actually significantly reduced, I think. But Mary Reeser is a great example. Like the image that you see is just of her leg sticking out. And I think a walker kind of over the top of it. It's like, what happened to this woman? And most of these cases are still unsolved. And the big thing that stands out with this is that it's been about 100 years or so, apart from a case from the United Kingdom, and I think around 2013, where there's been a coronal conclusion that this was spontaneous human combustion. And since then, like I said, the whole understanding and idea that it can just occur has changed. Like, of course, like the way that deaths are reported has changed anyway. Like if you go back to Victorian times, you had it that there would be a cause of death of overexcitement, or there would be a case of people dancing to death, like those sorts of things, obscure, strange ways of describing things which actually aren't the cause. So that went by the wayside, and so did spontaneous human combustion. But for this episode, it's not just human beings. It's also that this does seem to be connected to some type of, well, first of all, animals are being affected by it. But obviously,
what kind of animals?
Like barn animals, livestock are being affected by it. Rabbits. Like I'll go into that in a moment as well.
Weird.
But it's like, what is the cause? Because if it was human beings and if it was something to do with alcohol, well, then why is it that animals are exploding? Because they're not consuming alcohol. I mean, yeah, animals can get drunk and animals can, consume fermented materials, but they're not catching on fire. That doesn't seem to be the case. It seems to be like there could be a multitude of causes, but there's something that sits in the paranormal periphery that suggests that it is responsible for these spontaneous events. People are having run-ins with some type of entity.
What?
Yeah.
It's an entity.
It's it's something that has an intelligence to it, but we don't know exactly what it is. It sometimes presents itself like ball lightning, but it's not ball lightning. It presents itself as sometimes being an invisible barrier. And some researchers have noted, quite fascinatingly, that for spontaneous human combustion to take place, it has to occur along a specific fire ley line.
What the hell?
Yeah, there's like a whole pattern to this kind of stuff.
Okay.
So, pardon me, I'm just coming back from my flu. So going through this, let's start with these videos, right? So this is from January the 8th in 1988. This is Alfred Ashton, who passed away in strange circumstances. But Roger Penny is the fire inspector from the local fire brigade, who you'll see him in a moment, who came to investigate this case. So one thing that investigators tell you about spontaneous human combustion is it actually happens more often than you think. Now, this is from the very late 80s, maybe early 90s, this particular documentary, and I'll link to the full thing in the show notes. But a lot of inspectors have said off the record, it happens more commonly than you think, but because we can't explain it, it's just written off as an accidental fire. Went to sleep with a cigarette, even though the person didn't smoke, or left the heater on, or the heater wasn't turned on.
Well, you need to write something down.
Well, that's exactly right. Yeah, so let's just play this video and have a look at this case from 1988.
January the 8th, 1988. A normal winter's evening with a light rain falling. Alfred Ashton had sealed his windows and locked his doors
Love
to
the
keep out
mood.
the cold,
That's very late
and
80s.
settled down in front of the television. A neighbour had visited Mr. Ashton at around 6 o'clock to make his tea. He was the last person to see Alfred Ashton alive. Sometime during that evening, Mr. Ashton mysteriously caught fire.
I've been to many fatal fires over the years, but I've never seen anything quite like this. The only way I can explain it is to consider spontaneous human combustion.
Roger Penny was not prepared for the strange findings that confronted him that morning in January.
Delta 3 close.
Penny had been called to a terraced house in Southampton. The details of his extraordinary story have never before been told in public.
As I arrived on the morning of the fire, the first thing I was aware of was the extreme heat and smoke in the room. As I stepped into the room, I noticed the floor was very slippery. On looking around the room, I noticed that the windows were quite blackened by smoke, but they weren't broken. As the smoke began to clear, I realised that there was a hole in the floor, and across this hole was a body.
The way in which Mr. Ashton's body had been burnt was gruesome and puzzling. Only the legs and feet remained. The rest of the body was totally consumed.
Oh.
As I warned you, it is quite hideous.
Yep, there's his legs, there's the hole in the floor.
There's the hole in the floor. But what this sets up is this peculiar attribute of the fire that seems to be consistent with many spontaneous human combustion cases. It's like if you're a trained person in this field of dealing with these sorts of fires, you know what it's if someone is wearing a certain piece of material that's caught on the stove and caught on fire. This is outside all of that. There are factors like, yeah, of course there would be soot all through the place, but this strange waxy substance or fat-like substance.
Is it human fat?
Well, it's not though. This is the thing. Like the suspicion is it's fat, but it's not. It's some type of, it's a waxy substance that coats things. And it's like, it's almost like the fat or something in the body has been exposed to such intense heat that it actually has aerosoled and then coated everything. It gets even weirder in the next case because this one, it sounds like he attended it quite quickly and the smoke was still in the room, but he didn't get the glow. Some people describe, this is investigators, when they go to scenes of alleged spontaneous human combustion cases, that there is a heat that is kind of radiating from the walls. It's radiating from everything. It's being caught inside it, but it hasn't caught fire. It's this really strange effect. Now, with a fire, of course, that can happen, but this is something different because then you'll have another object, like you'll have a kitchen bench, which has no heat in it whatsoever. But
it's not affected at all.
Not affected at all. And yet it'll be a metal object, for example, that you would expect would contain more heat and would kind of, whereas like a stone wall or something, stone can hold heat for a long time, but it's just outside of the range of what is normal or what is expected if it was just a simple burn. So the other thing I want to notice here is these elements of the strange fire. Just play number 2 for me, please, Ben.
What I found amazing about this fire was the complete devastation of the body. There was virtually nothing left. Alongside the hole was this electric fire, although it wasn't switched on at the time. On the other side was an anorak hanging on the back of the chair that was fairly close to the body, although it wasn't severely damaged by fire. It was just showed a little bit of heat damage at the base. On the chair alongside that was a pile of newspapers that, although they were brown from the smoke, they weren't damaged by fire. And also a television set on the worktop had the casing had completely melted.
What? So how's the paper okay, but the TV set's melted? Doesn't make any sense.
And you remember the amount of intensity, the amount of heat that would be required to carbonize that body, that mass, would incinerate the entire room. Like but it wasn't. It was just down to that one particular area.
And it would take quite a bit of time as well, because when someone's cremated,
correct,
that's not a quick process.
No, it's not. No.
No, that's like an hour or more, right?
That's correct. Yeah, it takes. Well, I don't know if it's exactly an hour. It depends on the weight and the mass of the person and their fat content. But yeah, it takes a long time. Like with this kind of spontaneous human combustion thing, one of the arguments that's put forward is that for whatever reason, not all the time, but many of the popular cases, or the more well-known cases, I should say, it's not popular, but they seem to involve elderly people or older people that live alone. So the suggestion is that they haven't been checked on in a while, and then they would have had time to burn. So there is a possibility with this guy here that even in the audio there, you can hear that he was checked on by a neighbor that particular evening, and then of course wasn't seen until the next morning. But if there had been that much heat, the entire place would have caught on fire. It wouldn't have been just him. And now the other thing.
Well, it says here cremating a human body typically takes 2 to 3 hours.
There you go.
Temperatures between 1400 and 2000 degrees Fahrenheit.
But then leave the legs with a perfect cut?
But yeah.
Play number 3.
Okay. Is this also going to have his legs in it?
Yeah, it will.
The star of the show.
Yeah.
Looking at the body again, I noticed that the trousers, shoes and socks were not damaged at all. The cut-off point where the body had smouldered was a clean cut.
Yeah, why is it so clean?
I don't know. It's suggesting that he's been hit with some force. There is something
Death
that
ray.
has a specific...
Jewish space lasers.
Well, I don't necessarily think it's that, but this does start going into this possibility of it being an external source, something that might be supernatural, something that even might be natural but unrecognized, like an electrical current that we don't recognize, some type of power that can manifest. I'll get into stuff that was put together by Larry Arnold a little bit later on. He wrote a great book called Ablaze, and I've covered Ablaze on the show, so I won't go into too great a detail. But I didn't go into, with Larry's book in the past, into some of his theories about what's going on in depth. And it's such a shame, because I was reading a book just yesterday, actually, about Larry Arnold. And it was this book called something like Investigating the Paranormal or something. And the entire book, it was just basically like, no, that can't happen.
Yeah,
it
not
was
possible, right?
It was such, like, and they were bashing Larry Arnold because they're like, he was a bus driver. It's like, okay, where do I start with this stuff? It's like anything which is paranormal, you don't have people that are leading university professors that are getting funding to go and looking into this stuff.
That's true.
So you've got people that are doing this as a side hustle. They're doing, no, he's not even doing it as a side hustle. It's just interest, right? So just because, but this was the argument. It was like, oh, he's a bus driver, so he doesn't know anything. I'm like, this is ridiculous. But what he did find, which I really am amazed by, he did hypothesize that there was some type of particle that might be responsible for spontaneous human combustion. He called it the Pyrotron. And the Pyrotron is essentially some type of hypothetical subatomic or particle, essentially, that may occasionally, very occasionally, interact with atoms or the molecular structures that are inside the body, and it initiates this chain reaction of a micro explosion. So I know that's a little bit crazy.
Micro explosion.
Now, he has no way to validate that, right? That's just simply his theory. So look, I'll give him that. Like, you can just go, well, that's as good a guess as anyone. Like, that's even a sci-fi explanation if you want to. But what he did do is look into the patterns of behavior and the patterns of, where people are getting attacked, where people are, well, I say attacked because that's where I'm going, where people are suffering from spontaneous human combustion. He has this other great idea. He calls it the internal Hiroshima effect. Which I thought
God, this guy's name
is really cool. It's like it's connected with the Pyrotron, and apparently he uses this as a metaphor to say that it's a small internal explosion that will initiate a chain reaction of energy, will consume the tissue from within, and this will explain the sudden intense combustion that is localized to a specific location. And then, of course, there's the Kundalini stuff, which I'll get into a little bit later on, about people that they activate this fire inside themselves.
Well,
it's a
I always
bioenergy.
thought that idea was nonsense until we started to research some of the reports of people that had experienced this.
Yes.
And it really, the way they described it was this heat that felt like they were on fire.
Yep. And they
it was
say that,
indescribably painful.
and they feel it moving up their back, and they feel it kind of going from their loins up into their back, and then up into the base of the skull, I think, is what some people have described. Interestingly enough, people that have survived events of spontaneous human combustion describe something very similar. They describe that they feel like it is a strange pain that will actually move like a bolt of electricity, even though it doesn't seem to be electricity. And then, of course, it will emanate from their body, like a flame will emanate from their body. And then when they try to kind of like tap it down or get rid of it. Like, there was this one outlying case that I've covered in the past, and I don't remember the exact details because I don't have it here. But if you recall, it was of a guy that complained that his hand was hurting, right? And his hand started to hurt more and more and more. And then he looked down and all of a sudden his hand just spontaneously combusted into a blue flame. And that blue flame is commonly described in many spontaneous human combustion cases where the witness is seen to actually undergo the event.
Where's the blue coming from?
Well, that's a good question because, well, the strange thing is like flames will like burn different colors depending on what the material is. So if you put like copper into a flame, I think it goes green, or if you put another material, don't quote me exactly on that, but the metals and the substance that you're burning will give a different color to the flame. But this weird blue flame is a bit unusual. Some people have speculated that it's like phosphorus, but we don't have active phosphorus. So it's not even active. We don't have phosphorus. We've got phosphate in our body. So that's not really going to be causing that effect. But it does seem to be that if you look at the New Age world, then people describe the light of the blue fire, the Kundalini of the blue fire that comes inside their eyes.
That same terminology.
Yeah, which is a bit strange. And I thought, oh, okay, well, maybe there's some connection there. And then, of course, I've done a show on this where there was a researcher speculating that, and I think it might have been in connection with Brad Steiger, if I recall correctly, but it was that spontaneous human combustion is actually what is it called? A psychic suicide. That people get themselves into such a state that they actually force their body into a state of suicide, and it activates. And it's not obviously these particular particles that are described by Arnold, but it is something that is within our bodies which can be activated.
Well, producing fire is one of the classic cities, one of the classic supernormal abilities.
That's true.
There's even a term for it that, like the direct translation from Chinese, that it literally translates to one producing fire.
Right.
But it's like a term for someone with supernormal abilities.
Well, it's like tumo as well. Like monks can generate heat that's in their stomach area. And you've had Western researchers that have gone into mountainous freezing regions where there's snow all over the ground. And the monks been out there with their shirt off and they've practiced their meditation. And when the researchers place their hand upon the monk, it's actually almost scalding to their hand. It's not just that it's warm, it's scalding. There's an immense heat coming from it.
So could it be a case of spontaneous supernormal abilities getting out of control?
It could be, right? And that's why I'm not saying anything I'm suggesting today is the umbrella answer for everything. But it is something that I think we should branch ourselves out into and investigate a little bit further. But what Arnold did do, which I found to be really intriguing, is that he looked at the patterns of locations and he mapped out the case locations, and he looked at not just the people, but also the buildings they were with, if there had been anomalous fires in that area. And he said that when you look at this, he actually noted that there were anomalous fires, not just spontaneous human combustion, but fires that would break out in homes and those sorts of things, or out in the street even in certain circumstances, that if you line them up, or if you put them on a map, they lined up. They had an alignment. And this was akin to a ley line that, it implied that there was some type of geophysical or earth energy factor that was adding to these combustion events.
Right.
So is it that It's not that you simply are in like a Kundalini state or this psychic suicide state. That's not enough. You've got to be in alignment with one of these particular lines, and you've got to be in a certain mental state.
Tell me that you've got a map coming out with all these spontaneous combustion victims lined up, and there's a line going through them.
That would be pretty cool.
That would be pretty easy to disprove if they're scattered all over the place.
That's exactly right, yes. But no, I don't have that in front of me. But I find that idea to be intriguing because he said this is a cluster, like a clustering of anomalous fire events. And a lot of them are written off as just simply being unexplained. But Arnold suggests that these are geophysical hotspots, like literally geophysical hotspots, because that's why you have these cases. And there's a complex interplay that's going on here. It's not just simply that it's the person, it's the environment, it's the physiology, it's the location. These cases, and this is why the cases, they're not always the same, but they have similar parallels, similar attributes where you can go, well, this is not a normal fire, but there's something else going on here. Pardon me. So what I want to bring you to now is a case that was investigated back in 1980 by John Hamir. I'll let him describe this strange case that he came upon.
I had never encountered spontaneous human combustion before I entered that room. Everyone, police officers, superintendents, standing around were absolutely dumbstruck, but they knew that what they were seeing was impossible. I was a scenes of crime officer in Blackwood, Gwent, in January 1980, and I received a call from the officers at Ablaze requiring my presence at a house in Ablaze, at which there had been a death by fire. And I arrived at the house, which is situated on a mountainside in this freezing cold weather, and was surprised to find no sign of any fire engines in sight. So I opened the door and immediately stepped into a different world.
The strange scene that Hamer was to discover on the other side of that door has been described in nearly all cases of spontaneous human combustion.
There was a weird orange-red glow throughout the room, and the atmosphere was very steamy and the walls were radiating heat. The window had cracked with the heat, and both the window and the bare light bulb, of which the plastic shade had melted and fallen off, were coated in an orange-red substance, which gave the reddish light.
Typically, as well as this orange-red deposit, heavy condensation runs down the windows and doors, while metal objects, like doorknobs, are often too hot to touch. Everything in the room is covered in black, greasy soot.
So you get this grease once again. But
what's that orange stuff?
Yeah, what really stands out is that orange stuff. Now, it wasn't described as orange in that first case, but immediately, Roger Penny, he was saying that it was like, it was on the floor. Like
that's that fatty, greasy substance.
This stuff,
but they're saying that's what's causing the room to
glow yellow or orange yellow. It's very, very strange. It's like, it's not just simply this electrical effect. It's not some type of energy effect. It's also this, because if the body was being carbonized so rapidly, it shouldn't give out that kind of fat. Like, of course, fat does flow out when a body burns, of course, but not that it coats surfaces and then leaves the room to glow.
If it's all over the room, that suggests they're being vaporized and exploding out, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
that's insane.
But there's not even like any splatter patterns. It's like it coats the entire surfaces of things. Now, this case becomes even more unusual because it wasn't just like the heat, like the previous case. It's like things you'd expect to burn did not burn, and things that you'd expect to be okay weren't okay. But what really stands out is what happened to the carpet.
Was there just a limb sticking out in this one?
Oh, you'll see in a second.
Television set just inside the door. The knobs had melted and oozed out of shape. There was a settee covered with loose drapes. They weren't even scorched. I looked around, and to my right, lying on the floor, on a carpet in front of an open coal fireplace, which was out, was the remains of a man. The torso had been reduced completely to ash. The carpet on which the body was laid was burnt only in as much as it had been in contact with the burning chair and the ashes of the body.
This is obviously a recreation.
This is a recreation, of course.
It's not the actual scene.
But listen to what he's saying. So with these fires, right, when you have a body that burns, so normally if the body had burnt, the fat would flow out. It would kind of flow, and everything would flow down and out. So you would have this effect where it would start to move. Now, it depends on the heat, obviously, and how long he was burning for. None of that information we know. But with a normal fire, you can, they've got protocols to be able to work out, well, what happened, how long things took. With this, even if it was a natural fiber carpet, the carpet should have uneven burning patterns on it. It shouldn't be like almost a perfect carbon copy.
Yeah, it looks like a cartoon.
Yeah, of a person on the floor and into the lounge as well. So it's like, and the lounge is a different material. So, and if that was synthetic, it should have melted. Like if it was polyester.
Keep coming back to it's a different type of energy. Rather than just a human body burning by a normal fire. It's something else. It's some kind of energy.
It's a very different energy. So one of the ones, there's a lot of cases here, and Marcus Loth actually has a great write-up on spontaneous human combustion on mysteriousuniverse.org, which I'll link to. He wrote it a little bit earlier, but he lists some of the really early cases in here. You've got cases from the 1725 in France with Nicole Miller. Her remains were discovered almost completely incinerated in a chair in the house that she shared with her husband. But in this case, the chair was completely undamaged. Again, if you are incinerated, how is it that the chair is not? Now, details were not widely understood about this case, and it was suggested that it may have been murder, and her husband was actually investigated. But they were unable to find any proof that he had committed the murder. It seems like this actually was a case of spontaneous human combustion. You then have also the case from 1731 in Verona in Italy. You've got the Countess de Bandai-Cresson. She was at home enjoying an evening meal as usual before she retired to bed. Before she went to sleep, she'd spoken to a maid and she'd recalled that she was feeling dull and heavy. And that's what some of these earlier cases suggest. People will indicate that there's something a little bit off. Like they will say, I'm not feeling great, or, I'm feeling a little bit down, that kind of thing. But she went to bed. Her mistress went to check on her, and when she knocked on the door the following morning, there was no answer. So she opened up the door and checked inside the room. And she was confronted by this horrible sight. She said around 4 feet from the bed, there was this heap of ashes, but 2 legs left untouched from the foot to the knee with the stocking still on. Even more harrowing, between them was their charred remains of the Countess's head, as well as 3 blackened fingers. However, everything else was completely destroyed. But guess what? When the room was examined and the ashes were being picked up, they found that the ashes themselves left a stinking moisture in the hand. Bizarrely, however, despite the brutal remains of the Countess, there was no more damage to the rest of the room. There was an oil lamp that was on the side, but that was unlit. There were 2 candles next to it that were also unlit. One of the theories, I believe, in this particular case was that she'd left a window open and somehow a lightning, or a silent lightning they call it, had crept through a crack in the window and had come down possibly the fireplace and had incinerated her. Now, the thing is, if she'd been struck by lightning, she would have burnt, but she wouldn't have been in this fashion. She wouldn't have been incinerated, leaving this particular pattern that is consistent with later cases of spontaneous human combustion.
How can ashes leave behind any moisture? That doesn't make any sense.
Exactly. Well, I mean,
any moisture would be removed by the heat.
Correct.
In the burning.
But these ones weren't. And they would leave this moisture on their hands, which was difficult to get rid of.
Was it glowing orange?
It doesn't say that because, again, 1700s is difficult to get, full details on these cases. But I thought, again, even in these early cases, you have the same attributes coming up over and over again. Yeah, of course, the Mary Reeser case, which is from July of 1951. She was 67 years old. But then you also had another case 5 years later, December 1956. This baffling spontaneous human combustion case unfolded when a 78-year-old man by the name of Sik Kim was sitting in his wheelchair reading a newspaper. As he did so, however, suddenly he noticed flames erupting around his torso. He called out for help, and the flames began to engulf him. His neighbor, Virginia Cadet, rushed over to see what the matter was, and as soon as she saw him in flames, she rushed off again to get help. By the time she'd returned 15 minutes later, probably not a great idea. Like, she obviously hadn't heard drop and roll, but also I will get to cases where drop and roll doesn't help anyway. But by the time we know it was only 15 minutes, right? So we actually have a time on this one. By the time she returned, he was nothing but a pile of ash, except for that is his 2 feet, which remained perfectly intact. Even stranger, nothing else in the room was damaged by the flames, including papers, books, and clothes. His death remains a complete mystery. And it's like, well, no, it doesn't remain a mystery. The cause of it is a mystery, but spontaneous human combustion seems to be playing a role here. It's
pretty telling that the extremities are usually left behind. Like, you'll see the legs or the arms or the fingers left behind, which makes you think it's all starting somewhere around here.
Tumo.
The Dantian.
That's right. Yeah, Tumo or Kundalini, something like that. It's coming from your spiritual core. Some people have said that, oh no, it's because these victims, when they're in the writhing of the pain from the fire, they'll stick their legs out. And I'm like, well, but then everything else is incinerated. And why is it just so perfectly cut off in many of these cases? That just doesn't make sense to me. And there have been some scientific investigations into this. Like one idea is the wick effect, right? And this is the idea that somehow the fat combination within the body causes this wick effect for the spontaneous combustion event to take place. But it's like, well, first of all, what caused the initial spark? Like what lit them up? Unless they were brushing past a cigarette or something, which is often, so claimed, or they brushed past a lamp that they had running. But then, if it happens in 15 minutes, is that really the wick effect that's taking place? The wick effect should take a lot longer to occur. So the answers that are being put forward don't really answer it. One theory that was put forward, of course, you heard there that it's lightning that's causing this effect. The other one is ball lightning. Just play number 6 for me, please.
If the case for spontaneous human combustion is wearing thin, what other explanation could there be for these bizarre deaths? Could an unusual form of lightning, called ball lightning, be the culprit we've been looking for?
Now, the ball lightning typically lasts for about 30 seconds to 1 minute. 1 minute is the maximum time which has ever been observed. It moves always at about the same speed, always at about the same height above the conducting surface. And if it is intercepted and trapped, then it tends to go off with a bit of a bang. It explodes.
Great special effects.
It will not hang around long enough to cook slowly, which seems to be the phenomenon which occurs in the case of spontaneous human combustion. So I think it's extremely unlikely that the culprit is ball lightning.
And he's right. It is extremely unlikely that the culprit is ball lightning.
I think this guy's the culprit. Look at his face.
Well, his name is, this is Roger Jennison. He's from the University of Kent.
Look how excited he looks.
Well, of course. One of the arguments that was put forward as well with that was that it's not just simply the ball lightning. It's that the ball lightning somehow gives off microwaves, and those microwaves then hover over someone, and that's what causes the incineration. But it's like, well, microwaves would cook people. It doesn't incinerate. It would have to be such a long period. And why is it that those microwaves cut off at a certain point so that the legs are left behind?
Although you put an egg in a microwave and it does explode.
Well, that's like the Hiroshima effect.
Is that what's going on?
No, I don't think that's the case. And also, as he points out, he said, look, when you have microwaves that are in an open space, unlike a microwave or an egg, like you used a perfect example, that's a sealed environment. When you have microwaves that hover over someone's body, the microwaves just want to get out and escape. The microwaves just want to go in their direction and clear through. So while the source is hovering over, as soon as that source leaves and the ball lightning, again, only lasts for 30 seconds to a minute, it's not enough time to put enough microwave energy into someone to cause them to combust. So that's not the answer. But I can understand why some people have been suggesting that ball lightning is responsible, because if you start digging into the archives of many of these sorts of cases, you find that there are numerous encounters with people that they run into things that are essentially orbs or balls that have spikes sticking out of them, that are sometimes green, that are sometimes purple, and they fly into people.
That's why you said attacked earlier.
Yeah, people get attacked. It's almost like it's a inhabitant, like it's a supernatural element or a supernatural entity that hovers around particular locations, which may explain why it's along ley lines, because that's providing energy for these things, and they just, unfortunately, it's the person interacting with them is having not such a great time. So let's look at a couple of these cases that I actually pulled out from a book called Spontaneous Combustion. It's written by Jenny Randles and Peter Ho, and they did a great job in this particular book. I'll link to it in the show notes. They found some really fascinating cases that kind of sit on the outskirts of this kind of stuff. And they say that, look, they're not entirely sure that this is something which has been explained. It's, as in the wick effect, or it's someone, wandering up against a candle while they're reading at night. There's something rather unusual happening. So Jenny Randles writes that Michael Harrison had a book that he reported on a case of the Dawson family. They lived on Thora Island in Beaverton. This is in Ontario in Canada. And they adopted an orphan called Janine Bramwell. Now, Janine Bramwell suffered meningitis shortly after she moved into the house. Now, during her illness, just while she was undergoing her illness, hundreds of small fires would spontaneously break out in the home. Now, what is of interest here, Jenny writes, is that on one occasion, the family cat spontaneously burst into flames. When it ran out of the house in panic, the flames mysteriously went out. And fortunately for the animal, only its fur was slightly singed and there was no permanent injury. Now, I'm like, hang on a second. This young girl is suffering from an illness, a meningitis, an inflammation of her, spinal tissue. It's like, is that too close to the Kundalini? Is that causing, and it was only occurring, these fires were spontaneously breaking out while she had it, and then the cat caught fire, but it was limited by leaving the confines of the home. So was the energy somehow confined by the walls of the home? Like, why is it that it behaved in such a fashion?
Does Randles make that connection as well?
Not yet.
Okay.
Not yet. Now, she also writes, and that might have been investigated by Peter actually, that there was a case where some very strange things occurred. And why this book is particularly good is because both Jenny and Peter tried to track down the witnesses and the people that had these experiences and make inquiries. And she did. She got in contact with a truck driver who was a long-term army man who was so determined to remain confidential about what had happened to him that he actually asked to covertly meet at a spot on the M6 motorway. Now, Jenny writes that such clandestine arrangements, aside from this, obviously suggest that there's a fascinating story to relate. And indeed there was, for on the 9th of February in 1988, so we're going back to around the time of that case that was investigated by Roger Penny with Alfred Ashton. Apparently he was, this army man was working as a labourer in Shropshire. And he said this day was fine and sunny and it was just after breakfast. And whilst walking back from, apparently he'd had an interview looking for a new job, he saw a car parked off the road and a woman with a spaniel that was off its lead and running freely. Now, apparently this spaniel was running straight towards a small cloud of yellow vaporous mist that was close to the ground, but glowing with an angry ferocity, he said. And I'm like, okay. A vibrating sound came from this mist as it apparently rotated in the grass and bushes nearby. Apparently, the bushes and everything were shaking in response to the air pressure that it was generating. Now, the witness told Jenny and Peter that during the 2 minutes or so that he was watching this phenomenon, he said he felt the air being charged with static electricity. His hair was actually literally standing up on end. In addition to this, there was this musky, sulfurous odor that was everywhere. Like it was just filling the entire area all around them. And Jenny says, well, look, this could be ozone because, it can occur when the atmosphere is ionized by a strong electrical field. But I said, no, for me, there's a difference between sulfur and ozone. And a lot of people can kind of pick up the difference. But maybe it is electrical. Regardless, this dog had seen the cloud and was running into it oblivious to any danger. Within seconds, it was swallowed up and then inside the glow. A glowing cloud, right? It's not just a fog, it's a glowing cloud. The woman, who was now in hysterics, asked the man to help her. He tried to calm her down. Moments later, the glowing cloud vanished and the utterly prone body of the dog was seen on the ground beneath the now dissipating mass. Going to pick up the dog, the man reported that it was alive, but it was unconscious and panting heavily. Its eyes were red and fiery and its skin was soaking wet, but scalding hot to the touch. He covered it in a blanket and lifted it into the woman's car. Whilst the man was still in a state of shock, she drove away. Investigations, unfortunately, remaining of this case were limited due to the woman's refusal to cooperate with this, although she did agree that the story was indeed true. The dog was never examined by a vet, but recovered fully 3 days later. A cloud.
Don't we have reports of these glowing clouds and mists encountering automobiles and the paint is all burnt? And
you're right.
There's certain aspects of the electrical systems that are burnt.
Yep.
Whereas the metal frame is fine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we've covered those a few times over the years. So what is going on? Is that what's coming into people's homes? That's
one suggestion.
Glowing cloud.
That's one theory, that this is some type of form that does attack people. That's why I use the term attacked. But also they write a very interesting example actually befell a man in Suffolk on the evening of the 24th of February in 1975. The reason why this one is listed is because it's a similar cloud-like mass, but this one was coloured greeny yellow and it looked like it was pumpkin-sized by the postal worker who saw it. Apparently it attacked a dog and its owner, making a buzzing sound and generating an electric field. It was said to look like a cathode ray tube of a TV set, which Jenny says may be of significance. The dog cowered behind its master and then fled. The man stayed put until the object vanished, but he suffered a long spill of ill health afterwards, and he believes that this was caused by the consequences of encountering this thing. He had to give up work as a result of it.
You know what's so bizarre about you describing these things is Brett Oldham has an eyewitness that describes exactly this.
Really?
One of these clouds coming and, not attacking them, but sort of enticing them out to other activities.
Yeah, it's really strange. And there was this one case that I was reading that it was put down to ball lightning, but I don't think it's ball lightning because the witness described seeing this purple ball with blue spikes, like literal blue shards, not like with jagged lightning, kind of cartoon kind of images you'd expect, but shards, like sticks coming out of it and flying around chasing people through a field. It's like, that's not ball lightning. That suggests that there's something else that's going on here. Now, there was a report that was covered by a man by the name of Beeston. He actually included a copy of this, of a newspaper article that was published in the Sunday Express on the 29th of January in 1989. Apparently, he edited it to Who Flamed Roger Rabbit. Right? But this is a bizarre case from the West Country regarding a bunny being investigated by Home Office forensic scientists. So they actually looked into this in great detail. So the Daily Telegraph on the 24th of January that year reported that the police were looking into an exploding rabbit. So it speaks about how a police sergeant by the name of Colin Price came across a wild rabbit in the middle of a quiet country lane outside of Bristol. At first, he thought it was a ruptured gas main and was astounded to find instead a dead rabbit blazing fiercely upon the tarmac. Using a shovel, he tried to move the animal at the roadside when a sheet of fire 3 foot high burst from its carcass. Sergeant Price told the reporter, John Vincent, "It's the weirdest thing I've ever encountered in 20 years on the force." Apparently, the police were linking this to a second exploding rabbit case that had occurred around the same time. The other factor was that there was apparently around the same time in exactly the same area, consistent with what was described by Larry Arnold, is that there were 3 excessive or apparently motiveless attacks upon vehicles where they were set alight. No one knows why or how. So it's like bunnies are catching on fire, and now you've got cars catching on fire.
They can't catch anyone.
They can't capture anyone. It's a bit strange, and all in the same area. Now, at the time, they were putting it down to some type of mystery arsonist, but it's like, they couldn't find it. No witnesses whatsoever. Then June the 6th, 1977, you've got Durham. During a heavy downpour without thunder, a teenage motorcyclist was enveloped by a blinding light which emerged from a purplish-pink mass that had formed just a few feet above them in the air. A car was overtaking on a slight incline and observed this also. Both the driver and the motorcyclist felt power drain out of their engines and their lights stopped, but they continued moving until this effect seemed to vanish. The oval then vanished and steam was pouring from the leather clothes worn by the motorcyclist, although he had felt no heat. His clothes were in fact now bone dry, and his motorcycle, despite the incessant downpour, was now extremely hot to the touch. The fuel tank was scalding hot. Both the car and the motorbike had regained full power after this weird cloud or light or whatever it was had disappeared. Apparently on arrival at his home, the mother of the motorcyclist commented about how red and flushed his face was. This was reported to the UFO investigative group Crisis around that time.
Yeah, it's tempting to point out that this is some kind of anomalous weather phenomenon, but the amount of crossover this has with the UFO encounter phenomenon
so many
is pretty remarkable.
So many. So take this, August the 26th, 1989. This is the West Midlands. This was a cloudy but dry evening where a man was out with his dogs in a field. It was just a nature reserve. He claims he saw a soap bubble, but significantly larger than a golf ball, drift past in the wind. He said he caught his attention because of the way that it seemed like it was almost under its own intelligent control. He said it started chasing horses. It flew down and was flying around horses. After a couple of minutes, it headed into the wind, so it was moving against the wind, and flew towards the man. It climbed over a wire fence and then stopped right next to him. He saw a white feather-like blob inside. He said it had a semi-transparent surface and a small dark patch in the center, and he said he could see his own reflection in it. He was tempted to touch it, but luckily for him, the ball kicked into motion and simply vanished. So I'm like, yeah, he's probably actually lucky that he didn't touch that thing because...
Bringing to mind this one.
Well, that's right.
Reinhard Denke's The Orb incident where he got one-shotted by an orb in the head.
That's what a lot of this stuff seems to be. And don't get me wrong, Randles and Ho still go back to it being more of like a unrecognized or undiscovered natural energy that might have some agency to it.
It just seems to be intelligent.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. There's some, and this is what some people say about ball lightning. They said that ball lightning seems to even be curious and inquisitive. But I think these cases are distinctly different from ball lightning because plenty of people have, as much as it is strange and rare, many people have described their interactions with ball lightning. This is different. It's like the case of where someone claims that ball lightning was buzzing around the outside of their home, and it was like an old home, so it had a large keyhole, like those old 1900s keys. And they said apparently the ball lightning climbed up to their keyhole and then changed shape to kind of climb through its keyhole, if you recall that.
Yeah.
And as soon as it climbed through, they heard a sizzling kind of weird noise and then it just exploded. Is that ball lightning or is that something different? Is that something with agency, something with intelligence? Because if it was ball lightning, you think at the moment that it struck the metal, it would probably be earthed. But that's not what happened. So then you're right. BUFOR, the British UFO Research Organisation, has also documented many of these cases. And strangely enough, but perhaps not so, is the fact that many of these cases occur around the time of violent thunderstorms. So that's why people are leaning more towards that it's ball lightning. I'm like, I don't necessarily think so. I just wonder if the electrical activity and the atmosphere drives up something in the ground, something in the area, which fuels these things to come out and start interacting with people. Now, there was this incident that BUFOR described from 7:45 p.m., the 8th of August, 1975. This is in the West Midlands. And apparently there is a suggested possible direct link to spontaneous human combustion because a woman was cooking in her kitchen. She observed a ball of light about 4 inches in diameter appear in the air above the cooker. It just appeared. It didn't come through. It just appeared there. It headed straight towards her. And she said that it was a bright blue-purple but surrounded by a flame-colored ring. She heard a noise like a rattle, smelt singeing, and then felt a burning sensation that hit her below her midriff. She instinctively brushed the ball away and then it simply vanished. So it went again towards the gut area and then was gone. Now, she looks down, right? And her hand, she said, because where she'd brushed it away, her hand had turned red. It started swelling up to the point, at the point where it had gone into contact with the ball. Her gold wedding ring was now boiling hot and searing into her finger. She had to have it removed. But also there was a hole in her dress and her tights where the ball had struck, but her leg underneath was not burnt in any way, although it did become numb and apparently had a feeling of pins and needles.
Again, different type of energy. What is
different
this stuff?
type, but it burnt a perfect hole in her knickers. It's like that would burn your skin. So why is it like these spontaneous human combustion cases that I was playing there earlier? It's like you've got newspapers that don't catch a light and drapes that don't catch a light, and yet the TV will melt.
It's almost as if it's not a burning at all in the sense of how
it's a
we
directed
understand
energy.
it. It's like transmutation in a way.
Yes.
Like it's transforming it from one state of matter to, well, I guess that's what burning is as well.
Well, but it is. But no, you're right. It's something a little bit more esoteric, if you will. Like you're right. It's not that, even though the ultimate effect is a burn of some kind, but it's not burning that is consistent with what we understand with our conventional physics. Because it's like it shouldn't do that. Like if you're going to have something burn through your layers of clothing, you expect it that it's going to burn through your skin as well, and that just didn't happen. Now, some of the arguments is, well, it depends on things like, how sweaty you are and, what foods you're eating because that comes out in your skin. I'm like, oh, please. That's not going to protect you from a flaming ball, which is putting a perfect hole in your underwear.
Yeah.
There's something else that is definitely occurring here, but it's like like all this supernatural and paranormal stuff, we're never able to kind of lock it down and understand what's going on. Here's a case. So this comes from the 13th of March, 1980. This is from Warwickshire. Apparently a man was driving his car when he was passed at close range by a white object that was glowing end at each end. It had this cylindrical kind of shape to it. He said it only took a couple of seconds to pass, but he said all of a sudden the steering wheel became extremely hot and he nearly lost control of the vehicle. He had a nasty burn. He suffered a nasty burn on his hand. The only thing, though, that was heated in the entirety of the vehicle was the steering wheel. He himself felt no irradiated heat.
Weird.
Isn't that weird? Like, why is it that the steering wheel would practically catch on fire, but nothing else would take place? It's
almost
peculiar.
as if the orb itself is choosing what to burn and what to leave.
Right. So one of the arguments in that case was, and this was put forward, I believe, by a UFO researcher with some scientific knowledge. I don't buy it. I think it's not an explanation. But the argument is that much like ball lightning giving off microwaves, whatever this thing was, it was also giving off a certain energy at a certain frequency. And for whatever reason, that frequency resonated with the metal inside the wheel. And that's what caused only the wheel to become hot. I'm like, well, maybe, but surely the metal that's in the steering wheel is exactly the same metal that's used in other parts of the car. So why
you would presume so, yeah.
And also the steering wheel would have likely, if this is 1980, either been covered with some type of vinyl or a leather. So why did that, get hot? Like, why is it just, for me, again, it doesn't make any sense. But listen to this one. So this is a case that occurred at 9:30 p.m. It was a dry night on the 17th of September back in the late 1970s. A young couple were restoring an old stone post office in Cornwall. Now, apparently this was investigated by the researcher Terry Cox, and apparently they found out that this couple got more than they expected. As the woman prepared to leave the house, she sensed something very odd. She said there was this static change in the air. And by the step, this is at the front of this house, was a hazy green mist in the form of a ball. She ran back inside to bring her boyfriend out, who also saw the form. It was now floating just above ground level at the steps, hovering up towards the building. The ball eventually drifted completely upwards and hovered by a tree before it meandered away and disappeared. It was like it had no concerns. It was just wandering about. It was interested. But what stands out about this case is that within days, both witnesses who came within feet of the object began to feel ill. The symptoms included vomiting, headaches, muscle pains. They were both admitted to hospital. The man was given extensive tests and released when the illness appeared to clear on its own, and no cause was ever apparently discovered. His fiancée, the woman who'd been outside the longest, had another series of extreme difficulty and illness, down to the point where they couldn't work out what it was, so they thought it was her appendix. They removed her appendix, it continued, and then, like her boyfriend, it all just disappeared, leaving no trace.
What is going on?
Yeah, like, because it can't be radiation. Like, if it was radiation, you would have a burn, or you would have, like, it's just really strange. But it has, again, like this weird ball, like this glowing mist. There's also this case, which is from Fate magazine from April of 1961. It's a little bit of an outlier, though, but it relates to an American reverend, Winjean Savage. Apparently, he reported this story from a friend. This friend reported that he had awoken at 5 a.m. to hear his wife screaming. He ran to the living room and found her on a rug, a mass of flames. A small ball of light was seen briefly in the air just above her, almost inspecting her. The man was badly burnt trying to help, but she died from her injuries. It's not clear where the ball lightning went, just suggesting it's ball lightning. But as in many other spontaneous human combustion cases, the fire was extremely localized. Get this, not even the rug underneath the woman was burnt. So this
How?
is... How? And this is
You've
where...
got answers, right? Like, you've got all these answers prepared. You're going to drop the answers on us.
Well, I've got basically 4 minutes to go, and no, there's no answers. There's no answers with this stuff. But
it's 2025, Aaron. It's current year.
You trust the science.
Current year.
No, it's just, there are no answers to this kind of stuff.
Hasn't AI figured it out yet?
No, of course it hasn't. No, it has. But this particular case, the reason why I wanted to make sure I included that one, that even though it's, a more obscure report, you've got a direct link between one of these balls and a spontaneous human combustion case.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that we were getting from Elizondo, for example, and other people looking at the Skinwalker Ranch is another example, being wary of these orbs. You'd start looking into these paranormal hotspots or the UFO phenomenon, and the orbs start showing up. These balls start showing up with UFO investigators. Anyone that gets officially involved in any aspect has these strange encounters with these things.
Not only that, they follow the investigators home and then start affecting their families or their neighbors.
And there's an implicit understanding that some of them need to be avoided at all costs because they are extremely bad for your health. Yep. They can hurt you.
And certain colors are really bad. Green is really bad. And in that particular case just there a little bit earlier, what was the color? It was a green ball that they encountered. There's a case that we know, but I'll just briefly mention it. But this actually highlights, so this was from the USSR. It was documented quite well, though, because it was investigated by one of those government-backed, psychic research institutes. Don't know exactly who, but it revolves around 5 climbers that were in the Caucasus Mountains on the night of the 17th of August in 1978. They were 12,000 feet up on the mountainside, and they'd made camp for the night. Now, apparently, there was something in the air. There was some type of feeling. But one of the mountaineers, Viktor Kavanenkov, he was like lying in his sleeping bag waiting to get up. And he said there was this intense electrical field. He looked around him to see this strange yellow ball just hovering. He said it was a few inches in diameter, but it was hovering in the middle of the air inside the tent. It then drifted into the bag or the sleeping bag of one of the other climbers. And seconds later, that man began screaming in agony. The ball emerged from the bag and entered an adjacent one with similar results. He describes being frozen with fear, waiting for the arrival of the object on his side.
Just going bag to bag and he's next.
Yeah. It seared a hole right through the sleeping bag. He said it gave him an intense pain like a welding torch and he lost consciousness. When he came to, he said the ball was still darting around the tent, occasionally entering one of the bags. It attacked him again. He lost consciousness once more. And then he recovered. Well, when he recovered, the ball was gone. He said he was paralyzed and had a feeling in his body that felt like fire was rushing through it. His comrades were also howling in pain. When they could move, they found that one of their team, an Oleg Korovin, was so badly burnt that he had to be carried down the mountain. Apparently, they alerted a helicopter rescue team, and then he was rushed to hospital. But his injuries were so severe that he had passed away. There were holes. There were perfect holes burnt into his flesh, exposing the muscles in some places. They believe that he was less fortunate because in his sleeping bag, so the rest of them had just been sleeping on the ground or in the tent, right? But in their sleeping bags, he had been sleeping on a rubber mat. So the suggestion is here is that it didn't earth somehow, and so he took the full brunt of the attack. But
brutal.
It's like, is this ball lightning? But like the fact that it was going into them and it seemed to be like jumping from person to person to person, it was, and continuing the attack. It's like a wild animal that's got caught in a tent and it's ticked off. And it doesn't because it doesn't. Yeah, well, it doesn't. It acts on instinct. It doesn't act on logic. It's acting on instinct. But then it just dissipates. Now, there's so many of these cases. So what I do want to do, I just want to finish with a couple of the other cases. On Tuesday's show, though, I want to go into where this starts to tie into other forms of this energy, right? Because there are reports of these sorts of forms of energy electrocuting people when they go for a pee. Like they drive along a road and will get out and then they'll be electrocuted. There's also this idea that some people have seen that it's raining, right? And so they look into a field because they see a crop circle forming in the field. And there's this energy, like they've seen balls of light and everything else. But when they look into the field, rather than just being the balls of light creating the crop circle effect, it's like because it's pelting down with rain, they can see like a clear or a transparent cylinder, like a big cylinder that's come down out of the sky. And it's like a big pen or like a laser, and it's kind of moving around on the ground, like printing a crop circle into the ground. And, Randles goes into the idea that, maybe there's something about this energy, like it's a similar energy and it's a very high power, it's an intense energy. And the people that are getting affected by it, it's like they've just been caught in it. And I thought that was important to mention, though, particularly the idea of the tube thing, right? Because what if, for whatever reason, let's just entertain it, right? I don't know if this is a reason for it, but let's just entertain it. If you've got a weird pillar of energy, of transparent energy coming from the sky and imprinting something into a crop, surely, and it was like a tube, right? So it had a very defined edge to it. Is that what's happening in some of these spontaneous combustion cases? Is that person being struck by something like that, like this energy beam, and because of the nature of the energy, whatever frequency it's vibrating at, it goes through tile and brick and everything else, carpet, but it incinerates organic matter.
Everything except for their legs.
Because it's a perfectly defined edge. Yeah. So it leaves a perfect cut. But it was like that case with the woman, right? That it was a ball lightning or lightning had crept in. So with that one, it was like her body had been, but the legs were all cut off and her fingers that were sticking out were cut off and her head was there as well. So it's like it just got her torso. So maybe that's what's going on.
You sure it wasn't she just had her 7th Chardonnay for the night?
No, well,
lit up a cigarette.
That's one possibility like that. But that happened all the time in those days, right? People would it was actually like a societal thing that you weren't like. People would discourage from reading by lamplight. But they would all the time. And not only that, they had mosquito nets and those sorts of things, which were highly flammable, and they still did it. And in those cases, there was no element of spontaneous human combustion. It was just that the whole thing caught on fire and they burnt. Sadly, it's a horrible thing, but not in a strange way. Nothing.
Yeah, the whole house burns down.
Yeah, well, the whole room is incinerated. Yeah. Like these terrible things happen. These particular cases, they're just a little bit different. There's a little bit strange. So on the Plus show, because I'm really running a little bit low, on Tuesday, I'll also go into how Kundalini actually plays a role in this, because there were some cases of people vigorously dancing, activating their Kundalini, and then catching a light. So we'll go into that.
Like I said, I wouldn't be surprised after we've covered a couple of those in the past. And it's usually associated with people going mental as well, just having some kind of spiritual psychosis.
Yeah, and that's where it's like, this is what I really have to emphasize. I don't think anything that I've discussed on today's show suggests that is the be-all and end-all answer for what's going on here. I think it could be a combination of factors, but that's when we come back to cases like this, right? Because there are a few cases amongst the law of where people have experienced spontaneous human combustion and have survived. There was one really terrible one where a guy hadn't survived, but it had been witnessed by multitudes of people where a blue light... They
saw the ignition?
The blue light had been seen flickering in a window, right? It was like an abandoned warehouse or an abandoned inn or something like that. And the townsfolk went in to go and inspect, and they found that there was like a hobo lying on the floor, but his stomach was exposed, and from a slit in his stomach was a perfect blue flame, like a blowtorch, ejecting from his stomach. It then engulfed him and then burnt him, but he must have been in so much pain that they had to use a crowbar or some type of apparatus to unhinge his jaw from a mahogany step that he'd bitten into.
Oh my God.
While going through the pain. Like that's how intense it was. So let me leave you with this case though. There's a case that comes from 1822. It's in the countryside of France. It was a summer day and a local man called Renatu was out in the countryside of the village, and apparently he suddenly felt a sharp pain in his right index finger. He casually glances at it and his eyes widen in terror as he realizes that his finger was actually on fire. As he waved his finger around, it caused the entirety of his hand to ignite. He wildly battered his hand on his pants, setting his pants on fire as well. His left hand then erupted into flames when he clapped his hands together. Now in a panic, the man dashed as fast as he could to the house and screamed at his wife to bring him a bucket of cold water in which to douse the fire. But plunging his hands into the water failed to stop the flames. He then tried shoving his hands into wet mud and even tried milk, but this didn't work either. And by this time, apparently he'd attracted a crowd of curious onlookers that were milling about. One of these gawking spectators then brought him holy water, and this did the trick. Oddly enough, though, his clothes that were touched when they were burned, but they're like everything that he had touched, including his pants, were burned, but his hands were remarkably intact. He suffered only very minor burns considering how long they'd been ablaze. This case was actually reported in a local medical journal, and this historical account has never been solved.
That's crazy.
Isn't it weird?
Because the Chinese term for that, it's like Sheng Huo or something, and that's you literally described it, where you hold up a finger and it's like a little pilot light comes out of your finger.
And that's obviously a supernormal ability, is it?
Yeah, it was big in the 90s when Qigong was
Right.
sweeping through China, and the Qigong masters would do demonstrations to produce fire where they'd grab a piece of paper and light it up with their finger.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I was just surprised by also the spiritual aspect of this, that, he's like plunging into water and mud and milk, and that's not working. But once holy water is produced, it puts it out. It's like, why does that play a role? And that's when you start crossing into, well, are these things connected with something a little bit darker? Is that what's going on here? So I really don't know. But of course, I'll link to that in the show notes at mysteriousuniverse.org so you can check it out. And yeah, we'll go into more of this stuff, that's this particular energy, not so much spontaneous human combustion on Tuesday's show.
Yeah, sounding good. More coming up on this show. Head to mysteriousuniverse.org/plus. Sign up for a subscription today. You choose your plan below. Plans start at $9 a month for the podcast. If you get the Emmy Max plan, you get access to our entire back catalogue going back nearly 20 years worth of shows. And of course, this is our last season hosting Mysterious Universe. We've got new hosts lined up to take over in 2026. Aaron and I will be taking on a new show, brand new show coming in 2026 to be named.
Yes,
still
that's
to
still
be
up in the
named.
air.
But
We'll do it in the last 5 minutes. It's fine.
If you sign up for Plus now, you'll get access to MU, the new MU, and the new show. So good deal. Sign up today, mysteriousuniverse.org/plus. Help support your favorite show. You get an exclusive show every single Tuesday as well, along with the big extensions we do every single Friday. Again, it's all at mysteriousuniverse.org/plus. That's a wrap for this free edition of MU. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. If you're on Plus, stick around for the great stuff after the break. For everyone else, we'll catch you next week.